Welcome everyone to Monday Match Analysis. I'm Gill Gross, and it is time for a preview of the 2024 Shanghai Masters. The 1000 of the Asian swing is here. I'll have your dark horses, your upset alerts, your popcorn matchups, your quarterfinal and your final weekend predictions. Coming up, we're powered by BetUS. Of course, it's a little bit awkward right now because first round matches have begun in Shanghai. So I'm hoping anything I'm about to say is not going to be outdated by the time this comes out, by the time many of you hear it and watch it. Could happen. We'll see. But also, I'm going to make a prediction before I know the result of Beijing. I don't know if Alcaraz is going to win or if Sinner is going to win in the final, which is about, as of recording, I think it's about 5 hours from now. I will have analysis of that. I will also have analysis of the Tokyo final. Arthur Fils, what a title run from him. I'll talk about that on another Monday Match Analysis release tomorrow. All right? Couple of notes on Shanghai. Hubert Hurkacz is the defending champion. It was held for the first time in 4 years last year, and Hurkacz beat Andrei Rublev in the final. Hubie, unfortunately, has had to withdraw from this year's edition with knee pain. Hopefully, he hasn't caused any sort of long-term damage that's going to linger after coming back from his torn meniscus as quickly as he did. Hurkacz having to withdraw here, he'll drop to about 12 in the world. Conditions-wise, this is one of the quickest hard courts on the tour. So flat hitters, big servers, offensive players, they're going to get a boost from these conditions. This time of year, I tend to like players who have some momentum. It's obviously always good, or it's something that I always consider when I make predictions, who is in form. But this time of year in particular, I think it's a lot easier when you're feeling good about yourself and about where your game is at to just ride that wave and stay engaged. If you're in the other boat, if you're struggling, how easy is it to start looking to the off season, to start going through the motions, basically counting down the days until you get to take a little break and reset for 2025. I think for players who are struggling, it's pretty easy to do that. But I see a lot of players going on big runs, big hot streaks this time of year. So I take note of that. Another thing I want to mention, Chinese tennis, it's awesome right now. And it makes this time of year so much more exciting. It adds so much to tennis when you have home interest, when you have partisan crowds. Between Zheng Zhizhen and Bu Yunqiu and Jerry Shang and even Wu Yibing, who has not been able to stay healthy and had to get a wild card into this event because his ranking is way down there, actually won his first round match against Sumit Nagal. He might have been the first player to win a match at this year's Shanghai Masters. So that's exciting. The last note before we get into the quarter-by-quarter preview is that I'm a little frustrated with the draw. I'm not one to get frustrated with draws. I can't ever recall feeling this way. But the repetition has been a little bit annoying in the second half of this year. Wimbledon, Olympics, US Open, here in Shanghai, we're getting a lot of the same. We are getting a lot of Sinner-Medvedev quarters. We are getting a lot of Fritz-Zverev quarters. Musetti happens to be in the Fritz-Zverev quarter seemingly over and over again. It's not the end of the world, all right? I don't want to make too big a deal out of it, but it does feel like, not to mention, by the way, Alcaraz on the Sinner-Medvedev side, Djokovic on the other side. It feels like I'm looking at the same draw over and over and over again all summer long, and now we're into the start of the fall. Very odd. Very odd. Just before we get into the quarters, a reminder that Monday Match Analysis is brought to you by BetUS Sportsbook and Casino. It can be your betting home for the Shanghai Masters, and currently you can go to betus.com and use promo code YouTube150 for an 150% deposit bonus up to $2,000. Please gamble responsibly and don't harass the players. In Jannik Sinner's quarter, top seeds are Sinner, Medvedev, Tsitsipas, Shelton, Fils, Arnaldi, and Echeverry. My dark horse here is Roberto Bautista Agut. Upset alert, Stefanos Tsitsipas, and early popcorn, Tsitsipas versus Nishikori round 2. RBA, at certain points in this season, I thought he was like cooked, done. But that hasn't looked to be the case in the last few weeks. He was resurgent at Davis Cup, and now he has won 5 out of his last 6 matches. And this is the kind of surface that he's always really liked. He made the final here in 2016. It rewards his flat hitting. And he needs a fast surface now because he's no longer a titan of physicality. And he really does need to do damage at control play with his forehand. This surface gives him the opportunity to do that. And he's been confident. The draw is good. He's got Carballes Baena in the first round. He's got Arthur Fils in the second round. I don't think Fils is going to have much left in the tank for Shanghai. I considered putting him on upset alert for that reason. That was a very, very taxing run in Beijing in Tokyo for Fils. I don't think he has any chance to go deep here. Ben Shelton, third round. Shelton took care of RBA pretty easily in New York, so I can't see Bautista Agut getting through that matchup, but I still think it warrants a dark horse. Upset alert, Stefanos Tsitsipas. It's just really continuing to reel out here. Has not won back-to-back matches since the Olympics. Lost first round last week to Alex Mickelson. I didn't see the match, but you look at the score line. Boy, it was 6-1, 6-2. In the latter 2 sets. Couldn't even keep it close. Now, in his first match here in Shanghai, he's looking potentially at a meeting with Kei Nishikori, who beat him earlier this summer, owns a 2-1 head-to-head, and Nishikori looked awesome last week in Tokyo. So, certainly upset alert there for Stefanos Tsitsipas. By the way, if it is Mariano Navone, if Navone is able to beat Nishikori, Navone is starting to look more and more comfortable on the hard court. You can see him improving quickly. Whereas, earlier this year, I would have said Navone just has no shot to win on hard court. That is beginning to change. I do think that Tsitsipas Nishikori is worthy of a popcorn selection as well. The extent of this slump, this slide for Tsitsipas, is concerning, and it's a storyline here. So it's something to keep your eyes on at this point because, you would expect, even if Tsitsipas's hard court results haven't been stellar over the past few years, you wouldn't expect them to be this bad. And there's also a freshness factor with watching Nishikori. I mentioned the resurgence last week, but he has been on the mend for so long with various injuries that it almost feels like you're watching somebody. You don't take him for granted at this point in time. I'll just say that. Quarterfinal prediction is Jannik Sinner defeats Daniil Medvedev. Yeah, I have this again. I have picked this over and over again this summer, including at Wimbledon, where I ended up being wrong about my pick. But all in all, the head-to-head, other than that one blip at Wimbledon, since the U.S. Open last year, it has been extremely successful for Sinner, and they've played so many times. And going back to their last meeting at the U.S. Open, I thought it was, yet again, a concerning outing for Medvedev because Sinner looked to be in his comfort zone and essentially going toe-to-toe with Daniil, strength to strength, basically just playing a lateral baseline game, willing to trade from the back of the court, playing the kind of exchanges that Medvedev is supposed to win usually beats everybody in those kinds of exchanges. And you see Sinner coming out on top, not having to play a lot of slice, not having to come to the net all that often, not having to serve and volley, not having to drop shot, like just trading ground strokes and coming out on top against Medvedev. If Jannik can do that and beat Daniil, that's concerning in my opinion for Medvedev, because you know that if Sinner needs to kind of tap into the variety, he has that option as well. So I don't think it bodes well for Medvedev right now in this particular matchup. And I will also note that Sinner could play Shelton in the round of 16 this year again. They played at that very stage last year here in Shanghai, and it took a 10 out of 10 serving performance from Shelton, plus a third set tiebreak in order to get through Jannik. So that's an interesting storyline because we could get a direct rematch, but I would expect Sinner to come out on top. Let's move on to Carlos Alcaraz's quarter. He is the number 3 seed. Alcaraz, Ruud, Paul, Humbert, Tabilo, Baez, Jari, and Mahach. I don't know why I put a comma after Mahach. Hopefully I didn't forget anyone there. Just looking at my draw. No, I don't think I forgot anyone. I just put a comma. My dark horse here is Marin Cilic. My upset alert is Alejandro Tabilo. My early popcorn is Alcaraz versus Shang, round 2. Marin Cilic. I didn't get to really talk about this because I was on vacation at the time, but he wins a title out of nowhere in Hangzhou, and then last week he lost a 3-setter to Nishikori in the first round. So Cilic, first of all, great to see him back. Great to see him playing kind of vintage Marin Cilic tennis. I saw, obviously, everything that he does so well offensively, but I saw active feet. I saw good, safe targets. Everything you want to see from Cilic, you saw it in Hangzhou. And I kind of like this schedule spot because you've got some confidence, but you've also got some rest because he lost first round last week. And he is so uncomfortable to play against, really in any conditions, but especially these conditions. I mean, fast hard court is really Cilic's best, maybe other than grass. He's had a lot of success on grass. But essentially, there's no getting away from his aggression. Serves, returns, forehands, backhands. He hurts you everywhere. And that's why it's so difficult to play him in conditions that reward aggression and offense. In terms of his draw, Hugo Humbert could be his second round opponent, and I think Humbert's freshness could matter a lot. It's hard to predict how fresh he might be, but these are also conditions that suit Humbert. The ball wouldn't sit up very often for Cilic, and obviously Marin would, it would probably come down to who serves and returns better because whoever dictates in that head-to-head would end up having success. But I think Cilic could do some damage here. Upset alert, Alejandro Tabilo. Pretty simple, he's on an 8-match losing streak. I don't really know, exactly what's gone wrong over the course of these 8 matches. I did watch his Laver Cup match against Grigor Dimitrov, and there was just clearly a lack of conviction off the ground, particularly at the end of the match when Dimitrov couldn't move all that well, and Tabilo was having trouble making him move. First round, or first match, I should say, he'll play the winner of Riley Opelka, Arthur Rinderknecht, 2 rhythm-breaking players with big serves. Opelka in particular, I do think, and although there have been some rough results recently, it's going to click for Opelka at some point. I don't know when. It'll be sometime in the next 6 months where he'll start to play at the very least a top 30 level again. I'm really confident about that. You just don't know when it's going to be. Popcorn. Alcaraz Shang, round 2. First meeting between them. They were supposed to play at the Australian Open, and Jerry had to retire. That's electric stuff. I don't think I need to go much further. Quarterfinal prediction here. is Tommy Paul defeats Carlos Alcaraz. This is another matchup that we've seen a lot over the course of the last year. I will say that Alcaraz in general, draw-wise, he has a gauntlet. He has Jerry Shang, Nicolas Jarry, Hugo Humbert, Tommy Paul. That's the path that I have for Alcaraz. Maybe Cilic instead of Jarry. Maybe Cilic instead of Humbert. I know Jarry has been really struggling. But Jarry has, if my memory serves, he has a first-round match that he should actually win. And who knows, maybe he's going to start to get out of his rut. But yeah, there's a lot of talent and there's a lot of firepower in Alcaraz's path. Paul has a much better draw. He also has a much better draw than Casper Ruud, who's also obviously over there on the bottom half. Casper has also been pretty average since the Olympics. He played well on hard court in the beginning stages of the year, but that's kind of fallen off. So that kind of brings me to the quarterfinal matchup itself. And Tommy just continues to play well against Alcaraz. Things did kind of go off the rails at Wimbledon in the last two sets, and Paul got pretty erratic there. Even at the Olympics, though, it was a very competitive match. And it was more competitive than I thought. I thought Clay would really take away his chances in that match. But Tommy actually created some opportunities again. And the blueprint has been pretty simple. Take a ton of time away. Be very suffocating with the court position. And transition forward, very often. So, a big pace, take the ball early, come forward before Alcaraz really has a chance to breathe and get into, any sort of baseline rhythm. Tommy's also been very aggressive on the return of serve against Alcaraz. To me, it's got to be hard court for that to work because he needs to be efficient taking the ball on the rise. And it's got to be a quick court surface so that Tommy doesn't need to destroy the ball in order to do damage. And that's why I don't think clay works quite as well, or a slower hard court, because then, Paul has to really redline his pace in order to put Alcaraz in trouble and to knock him off balance. I think that becomes problematic. But with a slick, quick hard court, I think it lines up really perfectly for Paul, and maybe Alcaraz will start feeling it a little bit. I mean, Laver Cup, he carried. He goes over to Beijing. So many players struggled with that jet lag issue. Alcaraz is like the only guy who went Laver Cup to Beijing or Tokyo for that matter and actually went on a run as far as I can think of. That might catch up to him. He might be dealing with a little bit of fatigue. And Tommy has a lot of reason to push very hard this final stretch of the season because he is obviously on the outside looking in when it comes to the race. I believe he is, let me check. He's 11th, but you have Grigor Dimitrov, who's having trouble staying healthy. You have Djokovic, who has flat out said that he's not even really gunning for that 8th spot. Alex de Minaur also is having trouble staying healthy. Tommy needs to be looking at that and thinking, I have a chance here if I can go on a run. So he should be very motivated. We've seen that go the other way for some players where they put a little bit extra pressure on themselves, and that obviously isn't helpful. But that's my line of thinking with Tommy Paul over Alcaraz in that quarter. Let's move on to the number 4 seed, Novak Djokovic. He is in a quarter with Rublev, Dimitrov, Tiafoe, Popyrin, Bublik, Cerundolo, and Kaboli. My dark horse here are the 2 Chinese men, Zhang Zhizhen and Bu Yunchakete. I'm still getting used to saying his name. I think I got it right there. Bu Yunchakete. Yeah. My upset alert is Novak Djokovic, and my early popcorn is Djokovic versus Bu in round 2. It rhymes. As I mentioned earlier, I'm very excited to watch the Chinese men compete at this Shanghai Masters. Both Zhang and Bu are power baseliners. They are very big, strong guys, and that really translates into a level of easy baseline power that can certainly be a strength on the court, especially from the back. Both of them have been in form. Zhang made the Hangzhou final, beating Bu in the semis, and Bu had a run to the semifinal in Beijing just last week. Or this week, right? It's this week. The schedule has been very odd. Anyway, I believe for Zhang, he was a dark horse at the U.S. Open as well. Ended up getting injured in his first round match. He's been a dark horse a lot for me. I feel like he's a top 30 player. I don't know that his ranking has caught up to that yet. Well, it certainly hasn't, but I think he's going to get there, and that's why he's been a dark horse for me so often. As for Bu, let me tell you kind of what I like about what he's done this year. It's not just like he caught fire for the last couple weeks, and this has come out of nowhere. He has built a solid foundation of winning tennis. He is a 70% win rate guy in the challengers all year. Last I checked, this was during the U.S. Open when I last checked, he leads the tour in challenger level wins. This is not just a flash in the pan. So for a guy to do that, to be a consistent winner on the challenger tour, get the chance to play some ATPs and then go semifinal. I mean, how can he not have your attention? He's got to have your attention. Upset alert Novak. I just don't know what the preparation at this point looks like and, how he's going to get the engine firing for this one, because he couldn't get the engine firing for the U.S. Open. You'd think it would be even harder to maintain, a really kind of good level of intensity in the lead up to this event, post-U.S. Open. None of those majors really to look forward to, not even a year-end championship, not going for a year-end number one, as Djokovic has so often been doing this time of year. So I just don't know what to expect. Now, these are great conditions for him. He's won here 4 times. If he's serving at his best, that would take a lot of the pressure off of the rest of his game. That is certainly a possibility. But I don't see the level being there right away. His draw is good, but we'll see what happens. I'll talk a little bit more about him in my quarterfinal prediction. Popcorn match, Djokovic versus Bu. I've talked about both of them, so I'll just leave it at that. My quarterfinal prediction here is Francisco Cerundolo defeats Novak Djokovic. This would be definitely a cathartic win for the Argentine because he had his chances in Paris and couldn't finish the deal. I think he might have a chance to do it this time around, mostly as a product of Djokovic, again, kind of being in a vulnerable spot. But Cerundolo has played well in the last month. And I know this is a fast hard court. This is not a surface that you would think Cerundolo would excel in. However, he served really well at Davis Cup, and that got my attention. And, here and there, he's had these runs in quick conditions. It can happen for him. He's played well throughout his career in Miami. He won a title on grass last year in Eastbourne. It hasn't been consistent in quick conditions for Cerundolo, but here and there he can do it. And I think the draw shapes up nicely for him because he plays a lot of guys who are kind of just fellow power baseliners who give him rhythm. And I think Cerundolo can bang with anybody from the back of the court, including Andrei Rublev, who he has played with consistently. Every match that they've played has been really competitive and high quality, and Cerundolo's won 2 out of the 3. I've got him beating Rublev. I've got him beating Zhang in the 4th round. As far as the bottom half, I think Tiafoe could get to the quarterfinal if Djokovic is way off of his level. It's good conditions for Foe. I think he'll feel urgency to keep some good form going after the U.S. Open. I mean, he just has to. He actually did a good job in 2022 of keeping it going after New York. Last year, I thought he was pretty deflated by the Ben Shelton loss, but keep some momentum going. Like, he owes it to himself to do that. And I think he'll try his best to do it. But if Djokovic is serving well, that might be a problem for Tiafoe. Again, Cerundolo, he's felt a lot of success against Djokovic. I think he'll be able to finish what he couldn't in Paris. It's just my hunch. But I think this could be a chaos quarter. Truly. My brain was in a pretzel, if I'm being completely honest, trying to pick this quarter. I considered 6 different players to make the semis, to be frank. 6. That's a lot. All right, lastly, we've got Alexander Zverev, the number 2 seed. He's got Fritz, Rune, Musetti, Khachanov, Thompson, Nakashima, and Lehechka. My dark horse here is Talon Griekspoor, but I also put none because I'm just not very confident in that pick. Upset alert, I have Alexander Zverev. And early popcorn, I have Rune versus Berrettini in the second round. As I said, none of the unseeded players really grabbed me in this particular case. But Griekspoor, if I had to choose one, it would be him. He's kind of a fast court specialist. He is a really good spot server. He's a great net rusher, and these are the kind of conditions that suit his game. Upset alert is Alexander Zverev. Although the draw is good for Sasha, there was some consideration on his end that, well, maybe he'd pull out. He has recently been diagnosed with pneumonia, but he didn't recently get pneumonia. He has had it, and that is an explanation for why Zverev has often looked sluggish, low energy, coughing a lot, going back really to the Olympics. Now, I almost hesitate to put him on upset alert because he's managed to play some decent tennis over this stretch, even though I've watched him and it hasn't looked very good. He still managed to win a fair amount. But ultimately, I don't think he's going to be able to play his best until he puts this kind of lung issue that he's had past him. Early popcorn, Rune versus Berrettini, round 2. That could be a really good one. You might be wondering, well, why wasn't Matteo Berrettini your dark horse? Because, look, Matteo, it's been difficult to resist putting him as a dark horse all year long, considering he's won something like 75% of his matches for the year. I mean, he's played really good tennis since starting his season in March. It's been somewhat of a light schedule. But Berrettini had to retire against Feast last week with an abdominal issue, which has been the reoccurring injury for Matteo that has given him absolute fits throughout his career. So I'm never going to feel awesome about Matteo going into the next week after seeing that. I'm just not. Quarterfinal prediction here is Taylor Fritz defeats Lorenzo Musetti in a reversal of the Wimbledon results. I did heavily consider Holger Rune because I like what I saw from him last week. I mean, he looked very motivated, very engaged. But it's been so up and down for Holger. Like, I gave him an optimistic prediction at the U.S. Open, and then he kind of no-showed against Brandon Nakashima. So I never know what it's going to be. I certainly know what it's going to be for Taylor Fritz, who is extremely consistent. And I just have trouble for that reason. I have trouble picking Holger to beat Taylor on a hard court in a Masters 1000 tournament just in this spot. I just have trouble getting there. Musetti, on the other hand, he's been decent on hard court. Nothing spectacular. I'm just looking at the draw, and I think decent might be good enough to get him to the quarterfinal. Fritz Musetti, I actually picked Musetti in the Wimbledon quarterfinal, one of my better predictions all year long, because of the tactics and the way they kind of match up. I think Taylor will have learned his lesson, actually. A lot of the experiences that he had at the U.S. Open has kind of, even the loss against Sinner in the final, has kind of pointed him in the direction of when somebody is playing a lot of slice defense. You got to come forward and be able to put volleys away. And I think that will work in Fritz's favor, and I think there will be a lot less nerves, and he'll be able to perform on his forehand side, which he couldn't do at Wimbledon. So I think he gets through Musetti in that head-to-head this time, and I think he'll be hungry here. He lost first round as defending champion last week at one of his favorite tournaments in Tokyo, but Taylor's a guy who does a really good job of not fading throughout the calendar year. You know, he usually this time of year continues to play with focus. So that bodes well for Taylor. Final weekend prediction revealing in 3, 2, 1. In the semifinals, I've got Jannik Sinner beating Tommy Paul. I've got Taylor Fritz defeating Francisco Cerundolo. I've got Sinner defeating Fritz in 2 sets. I was not expecting to pick a rematch of this year's U.S. Open final. It just so happened that that's where I landed. One of those things, again, unplanned, a little bit odd, makes even me hesitate in making the pick, but that's how it crumbled. Obviously, look, Taylor does deserve a lot of respect, particularly on hard courts right now. And I think the draw works out really nicely for him. And Jannik Sinner, you know, he's kind of in it's hard to pick against him in these conditions until you see him lose. That's how dominant he's been on hard court. I don't know what's going to happen in this Beijing final against Alcaraz. Again, it hasn't happened yet. But for now, right now, you got to roll with Jannik Sinner because he has done everything possible results-wise to tell you, do not pick against me on a hard court. That's the reality of the situation with Jannik. I will leave it at that. Thank you again to BetUS. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe. I will see you next time.